if you have a culture that people want to come work for, and that takes a lot of time. That takes, in many cases, years of dedication, because, word of mouth is the most powerful way in which amazing people come work for you. Yeah. Like, I want to go work for that company. They're doing something cool. They're taking care of their employees. They're making their employees be part of the story. I always say, when you come work with us, I want your fingerprints on all of our, on our brand.
3, 2, 1. Role models make it real. If the role model is somebody you can relate to in some way. And so each year I try to bring in a couple of extraordinary entrepreneurs, people that have started with nothing, and people who built something that's extraordinary. And there are certain qualities that do that, and especially if you've done it over the last 10, 15, 20 years. Because we've experienced the 2008, the world financial crisis, we've experienced COVID. So if you did well in business during this time, it's a lot different than when everything's just flowing so easily. So I'm gonna introduce you to 2 entrepreneurs that are dear friends of mine who are just brilliant, but they're also super humble. You'd never know who they are, and that's one of the things I respect about them. But they always over-deliver for their clients. And the first person is a gentleman who's been an entrepreneur basically his whole life. He didn't have to be. We'll talk about this a little bit when he comes up here, but his family comes from Iran. They lost everything. But his father was an amazing entrepreneur as well, and literally is a philanthropist, extraordinary investor, business person, self-made billionaire starting over from scratch again here in the United States. Pretty extraordinary. But rather than have his dad's money or hotels, he wanted to do everything himself. He could have easily, like most kids would do, just, hey, take the ride. But he had his own vision, his own sense of creativity, and he wanted to, well, initially just make some great nightclubs. He was a young man, but gradually he designed lifestyle hotels. And today he's created a whole new technology around food that we're going to talk about in a second. Ladies and gentlemen, please give up my dear friend, Sam Nazarian. Sam, it's so great to have you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hello, everybody.
Well, listen, we have 4,000 entrepreneurs here, 1,000 in a room, 3,000 around the world in 76 countries, all here to maximize their ability. There are people here just beginning their journey. The largest business in the room, 750 million. So there's quite diversity. Right. But every entrepreneur has a journey. Right. And yours is really, really unique and special, as all great ones are, but yours is especially because you came to this country when you were 4, right? 4 years
Exactly, 4 years old from Iran, yeah.
Tell people a little bit, I'm just curious, tell a little bit about how you came here, what's it like to enter a country, live in a hotel, not know the language, not know the culture, and then how the hell do you turn into the guy that creates culture for everybody around the world? I mean, how did that play a role, if at all? But I'm really just curious. Tell us a little bit about your journey, if you will.
Well, no, it's a great question. I think, first of all, I've been blessed to have the most amazing parents. And I think when we left Iran, I was 4 years old. A revolution had just happened, and we ended up having to kind of start over. And the thing that was probably some of my first memories living in a small hotel, and it wasn't necessarily that we were living in the hotel because that's where we wanted to live. It was just we didn't know if we were going to go back. Oh. It took about like a year to 2 years to ultimately, for that to set in that we cannot go back there again. Yes. For my parents and for my uncle and his family. And through that process, I think the part that was the best for me, my first memories was I didn't know any different. I was 4 years old. I didn't remember what we left. So for us, it was really about the culture, the values, and then I think the complete instinct right away to assimilate. For my family to really be a part of the communities we were in, and right away they threw us in school, and right away it was something that for us, I think immigrants really appreciate this country the most.
Yes.
Because that first generation mentality of urgency.
Yes.
Of accountability. And that's really kind of what stemmed the growth of us into the communities we were in, and ultimately through stabilization into Los Angeles, where I grew up.
I remember you telling me that in the beginning it was a little rough because you guys didn't exactly fit in, right? A huge number of Iranians came here, and you weren't considered too cool or hip. People were trying to kind of sometimes push you aside or make you wait outside for a restaurant forever. Did that play in a role in how you treat people differently?
Well, growing up, we were all of a sudden roughly 200,000-300,000 Iranians came to LA and LA County. It's actually still the biggest population of Iranians in the world outside of Iran are in Los Angeles County. So all of a sudden it was a shock to the system. And a lot of people dealt with it differently. I mean, the people that were, absorbing this amazing migration, but it was very, my parents, I'm the youngest of 4 kids, and my brothers and sisters are a lot older than me. And they came as teenagers. So for me, going to school every day, bullied, picked on. Luckily, I was bigger than everybody else, so I had a qualifier that I could, but there was always kids bigger than you because they're older. But, the thing that kind of always was a constant for us was, never really disrespecting the name and the family name and our, doing things that were really, outside of what our parents expected from us. So that kind of kept us all in line. And it kind of really was the DNA of what my parents ultimately gave to us. It wasn't the wealth it was just really the DNA of being good people.
Yes. Your father came here, he lost everything. He built quite a business in Iran, and I guess he'd gone overseas for a period of time as well, but not the US.
Right.
When he came here, he lost it all. And then he developed into this amazing investor, philanthropist, businessman, a billionaire, self-made billionaire in America from nothing. How did he turn that around?
That's a great, I mean, we could sit here and talk about that. There's so many great stories like that, the American dream. Well, my dad and my uncle, they lost their dad when they were 2 and 4 years old in Iran. We're Jewish, and back then in Iran, Jews lived in certain parts of the city of Tehran. So they were selling light bulbs and cigarettes and trying to support their single mom. And that kind of resonated with them, which transcended to us. And by 1979, they had built a big business in construction and construction equipment and all the trials and tribulations from that to that. But, to me, what was probably the most unbelievably unique thing about my dad and my mom was when we did lose everything, meaning houses, homes, birth certificates, we just had to leave overnight. 4 kids, 4 suitcases, as they say. They never once at the dining room table said, look backwards. They always were optimistic and looked forward, even though, it was very difficult to do that. And instinctually, you want to say why and what we lost. And I think that also, kind of resonated with us as far as kind of how we looked at the perception of life. But him and my uncle ended up borrowing money from some family, some money they had outside of Iran, and they ended up buying a tool and die company, a small one in Pasadena. And in 1985, one of their great friends, who was a scientist, now mind you, they had 4th and 5th grade educations, my dad and uncle. They're worldly, but they didn't have the kind of core engineering DNA. Somebody came to them and said, hey, we have an opportunity to invest in a company. They did. That company ended up being Qualcomm. So
it kind of Qualcomm.
Yeah.
Wow.
So they settled.
Let's hear it for that. That's amazing. Man, that's amazing. So how did your entrepreneurial spirit, your core values obviously are affected by your father and your mother. How did it affect the way you looked at entrepreneurship?
Well, again, to me, because I was kind of in this little bucket between older siblings and myself, I really was trying to find my own way. And ultimately, sports was a big way of how I expressed myself. I played college basketball. I was very athletic a long time ago. Many kilos.
For all that good food, right?
Exactly. But ultimately, to me, I got exposed. My first business I started was in telecom, ironically, but not Qualcomm. We saw this technology called Nextel back in 1999. We ended up becoming the biggest reseller of Nextel in Southern California, and I sold that for $2 million. And
you were only 21 when you started that.
I started at 21. I sold it at 23, and it was a big deal. I had 75. I had no idea what I was doing. Started from scratch, but instincts were there as far as seeing an opportunity, filling a void, and getting it to scale. Looking back.
Yeah.
And that's kind of all our businesses subsequently have followed that same kind of core principle.
What do you think made you successful at 21, so successful in that company?
I think betting on the right idea always helps. And if you have the commitment, and I always say this when I speak at universities or with kids that I'm trying to mentor, if you're on the right idea and you have the consistency to be curious and learn the business as you go, as long as you have enough money to get there, you'll get to altitude. And we say the turbulence is really what defines you, and then once you get to altitude, that's really what kind of gives you the satisfaction of being successful. And ultimately, that's kind of how that business ran. We were at the right time, at the right idea, and I was curious enough to understand what the competitors were doing, more importantly, to know why this was a good idea at that time. Yeah.
And I'm fascinated, we've become good friends and I've got a chance to partner with you, giving me that privilege, which I'm very appreciative of. But the thing I'm most fascinated by, besides your ability to be such a tastemaker and brand creator, is the level of humility you have. And I don't say that lightly. It's just really a beautiful thing. And yet you also have the drive. They don't always go together. And I'm curious, like you never wanted, you said, I want to have my own money. I'm not taking a dime from my father. What gave you that inner drive?
Well, I think to me, the important part was, how I felt about myself. And also instinctually, I wanted to prove to my dad.
Oh, okay, got it.
Right? So, to me, it was, coming at that time, there was such success around us as a family. I wanted to really kind of showcase that to him. And I was able to do that through many, many stages of his life and my life with him. That I think that's really what it was. And I think ultimately, once I got into the lifestyle business, there was a lot of chips, immigrants also have chips on their shoulder,
Yes.
And I think, as you said, when you are an immigrant coming to a country and you're not accepted, either you accept that or you don't. And I think for me, it was, I really want to change that. And I want to be the leader. And so there was a lot of, I think, core DNA in that. Me growing up, being around, people that really enjoyed the ride, enjoyed the hustle, the grind, if you will, of getting to being entrepreneurial from that perspective.
So you surrounded yourself with people like that also?
I tried to surround myself, again, in hospitality, we were in a hotel company, we were in a hotel family, restaurants, nightclub, zero. It was like, full stop, especially in a new country, in a new, a new custom and a new culture. So I did. And the other part that I think is very important is if you are the customer for what you're aiming to do, then you can build something for yourself. In that time, I was 22, 23 years old. I was the customer of nightlife. Yes. I was the customer of lifestyle. I did build a hotel brand like SLS that didn't exist, and I wanted to go. And so that's what makes it fun as well, right? When you are the customer. I think in all those respects, we went from one nightclub to LA to 45, 50 locations in LA, and we became the largest operator in LA's history since.
Well, when you were 28, I think is when you made your first. Built your first nightclub, is that true? Hyde up, and when you did in West Hollywood, because no one was there. It was like West Hollywood was just a bunch of places that people stored stuff, right? There was certainly not the hip place to go. So when you did that, A, why'd you pick that? B, what made you certain you'd be able to succeed in an environment that was not considered hip or cool? Did you have any concerns, and how'd you get over them?
Well, I think the first place we did was exactly right, 27, 28. It was part of a bigger idea at the time. Entertainment and nightlife, to me, seemed like a big void that hotel companies didn't understand. Restaurants were also a big void that hotel companies didn't understand. So I had some exposure in hotels. I was an investor in a couple of hotels, like the Viceroy brand. That was one of the first brands we started, but as a limited partner. And I said to myself, if one company can actually build a hotel brand that's relevant, and restaurants, and work with chefs that are about to break, not Nobu, but Katsuya, not Jean George, but this crazy guy in Washington, D.C. named Jose Andres, that nobody had ever heard of. And so back to your point of surrounding yourself around great people that were very entrepreneurial, that really also had the same drive. And nightlife, to me, that was a special sauce. If I can bring energy to a hotel, to a residential project in the form of entertainment, whatever a nightclub or entertainment represent, that could be very interesting. So when we started SBE in 2002, when I was 26, 27, the first vertical that actually launched first was nightclubs, because it was easy to do.
Yes.
And that location specifically was a tough location, gang shootings, and we kind of turned it around.
Why did you go there? Was it because it was cheap, or did you go there because you could turn it around?
I wouldn't go there, but we ended up buying the operator. It was a place so we bought it, we shut it down, and we renovated it, and we brought, luckily at that time, all the celebrities ended up showing up. So
wow.
All the A-list celebrities wanted a place that was run by an owner, not by promoters, and all these kind of all these elements that nightclubs have. We never brought in investors. It was just me, wow. and we ended up leveraging that into kind of a connectivity to celebrities, and then ultimately our guests, and they trusted us, and they knew they were going to be safe and have a good time, and it kind of.
So you're 29 now, and you make the decision to actually get in the hotel business, right. And you start out in Miami, at the Ritz Plaza in Miami Beach. Pretty big investment. Yeah. And I think it was 2014. Is that right?
2014, exactly. Yeah. Well, we bought the hotel in 2004.
No, 4. That's right. I'm sorry, 4. So you went through 2008, refurbishing that hotel, eventually turning it into SLS Hotel there in Miami. That was a huge investment, and you went through one of the worst economic times in our lifetimes. Yeah. How'd you make it through that time? How'd you manage through it? It must have been intense.
2008 was and 9 and 10 were pivotal years for me because either I was going to because I had a hotel in Beverly Hills that had just opened, SLS Beverly Hills. I had bought the Sahara Casino with institutional partners, and we were running that with the intent of turning that to an SLS Las Vegas. And we had this project that was under construction in Miami Beach, and all CMBS loans, all with institutional partners. And it was one of those things that either defined you as an individual or you just gave up and threw the keys at the bank and called it a day. And there was a lot of soul searching. I was, like as you said, 29, 30, 31 in that period. And I roughly, I don't know, at that time, 4 or 5, maybe 6,000 employees around the country. And it was tough. But end of the day, we willed it through in the sense that there was no other option. We were going to get this done. We were going to find the guys to take out the old lenders, and we're going to find new private equity partners that were more expensive, but we're going to get the project done. Be fiduciaries to your partners. And all those projects did open. They were successful. And ultimately, we built a global business because of, I think, the reputational aspect of not just the brand, but how we dealt with our partners.
Let's talk about your secret sauce. Okay, you're talking about nightlife. You're talking about lifestyle. I know you've talked about how hospitality is really a business where your job is to make people feel good about themselves, good or bad, that's a part of what it is. And I know you're famous for, man, from the time somebody goes through those velvet ropes, boom, they're greeted there. So tell us a little about your philosophy. What is your secret sauce? What has allowed you, besides, and a little bit about your all-in philosophy, which is most people, by the way, have a hotel and then they'll lease out, let's say, the top of that floor for entertainment, for the bar, that type of thing. You came in with a very different approach. So tell us a little bit about your secret sauce and what you came across and what became the basis of really SBE and SLS.
I think for that, we saw that the boutique hotel world in 2002, 3 was a very interesting lane in the hospitality space. So if you're Hilton or Marriott or Starwood or Hyatt, you wanted nothing to do with boutique hotels because it wasn't scalable. Hilton, they had the luxury hotels like a Waldorf, they had the convention hotels, they had, limited service. And when I came up with this idea of style, luxury, and service, SLS, the idea was, there's a big gap between that luxury customer and that convention customer that wants experiences. So the thing that really jumped out at me instinctually, without any background, was if you can provide all those services, you can create a very interesting mousetrap that not only provides a great experience for your customers, so you're not going to staying at a hotel and the restaurant is somebody else's and they say, sorry, you can't have a table or a reservation. The bar, the rooftop, as you said, or campuses that need multiple F&B branding. But so we committed to the restaurant world, we committed to the entertainment world, and more importantly, we committed to the idea of connectivity, which really differentiated us. And the good thing about these big archaic institutions is they don't know what they don't know. So if you have a conviction that in this particular vertical that the consumer behavior is changing, demand drivers are changing, really the emotion of consumers to your product are changing, stick with it, because ultimately those big institutions, once they realize they need it, they're going to pay a lot of money for it, which is what ended up happening to us in the hotel management company.
When you design a hotel, restaurant, a club, what's the most important 2 or 3 things that you think about in the design, and what do you make sure is part of the experience?
Well, as an operator, it's about flow, right? When you look at a floor plan, it's making sure that you have experiences for all your customers. So that's kind of one part that architects don't understand, designers don't necessarily understand, and institutions don't understand in the sense of kind of the big hotel companies. So that was a very interesting differentiation. Number 2, not too dissimilar with what we're doing now in the food tech business, is creating as many experiences that you can, right? So you can give people the opportunity of not just for the hotel guests, but for the communities to come and experience your property, which drives awareness, drives organic marketing, and drives revenue, and sustainable revenue. I mean, we're in Miami now where it's a cyclical market, usually. And the community has to really embrace you for you to kind of have a very good year-round operation, not just when it's high season, so to speak.
And the process that you started to see, what was the incongruency you saw in other hotels? They did one thing and they left everything else entertainment-wise. How would you describe what you saw that became kind of the breakthrough, the aha moment for you?
Well, I mean, hotel operators want to be hotel operators, right? and they don't want to be involved in food and beverage. They don't want to be involved in entertainment, nightlife, rooftop bars, mixology, beach clubs, right? Entertainment has a lot of categories. And to me, the aha moment was, if we can build a company anchored by a great hotel brand and a differentiated hotel brand, which is what we thought luxury lifestyle was, and you do all those services, you can really be a differentiator to your competitors. It's exhausting, as you know better than anybody, my friend, to be relevant in all these businesses. But ended up having 30 restaurant brands with great chefs, 25 or 30 nightlife entertainment brands. And a good example is SLS in the Bahamas, where we put 19 of our brands with a 300-room SLS, and that became very successful as well.
Wow. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about branding. You've been genius at creating branding. You hadn't just bought brands, you created brands. Right. How do you decide this person's going to be a brand that you're going to build? Let's say a great chef, for example. You've really built some reputation. Now everybody knows them, but you found them in the early days. How did that come about? What kind of criteria did you look for if this is some star power here, or could be built into star power?
Well, at first I just got lucky in finding some great entrepreneurs who had a lot of ambition. Culinary people generally, they're very focused on their craft. They're very focused on their reputation, how food gets disseminated, food quality. So finding a chef that you say, listen, him or her, we're going to take your idea and take it global. When you have no credibility, it's hard to do, to get them to trust you. So from a culinary perspective, what we focused on was finding great partners, but then having a portfolio of cuisine categories. So brands like Katsuya or The Bazaar or Clio or Morimoto or you name it, we had every culinary category. So if we needed a steak concept, we had our Dario Cecchini concept, the most famous butcher in the world. If we had a Japanese concept. So by having the portfolio, then you become a complete solution in cuisines. 3-meal, grab and goes, whatever it is, buffets, right? So then you can literally be, as I say, a complete solution to your operators, but also to the owners of these hotels. So the owners only have to deal with one operator, which is a very key distinction, but a very important distinction as you're competing with other brands like W, Edition, that have none of that.
Yeah.
None of them do. And, from that perspective. So,
when you turned, 41, it seems like, if my math's right, is that really when you bought the Morgan Hotel Group? You added Delano, you added the Mondrian, Oriental, and so forth. And then a couple of years later, 45, you sold your business for $850 million. You kept your brands, though. Yeah. Tell us a little about that. It was December 2019, if I remember, if you're telling me correctly.
Exactly.
Right before COVID, he sold all his hotels for almost $1 billion. It's like, so what, after building all this all around the world, what was the trigger for you to decide to finally sell? Because a lot of people never make that move. You certainly did, so.
Well, I was, as you said, 45. I had 2 kids and a beautiful wife who I really saw less and less of just because I was traveling about 280 days a year. I was on the road. We just opened a hotel in Qatar for the Emir. We just opened a hotel in Dubai. We had just opened 3 hotels in London and Buenos Aires. Anyway, it was a global business, and I was exhausted. But more importantly, we found the right buyer. We found the right partner. We found somebody, those same big chains I told you that didn't want nothing to do with it, now needed this category because the category had become so relevant. And we found the right partner to acquire this business from us and for me. And to be honest with you, I wasn't as passionate about that because I wasn't the customer anymore. I wasn't the single 25, 26, 27-year-old person. I wasn't the person who was going out late night or wanted to try all new places around the world. It was my life had changed, and it wasn't as fun. We opened the first SLS in 2008. 2012 was the next one, and then 12, and then 15. So one a year, one every 2 years. Towards the last 3 years, we were opening 9 or 10 hotels a year. So we were by far the biggest in the world in lifestyle, which brings its downside. Which you lose that sense of connection and yeah, exactly.
It became more just doing deals and creating and doing the things that really filled you up. Exactly. Notice again, we talked about the other day about your own stage of life and how you evaluate your life and your business differently, wanting to anticipate that, right? Before we talk about C3, I'd like to get a couple of questions from the audience here. How about right back here? Yes, sir, in the white.
I'm in the restaurant industry. We just opened a year ago, and it's emotional.
Just hold the mic now.
Over here? Awesome. Sounds better. Beautiful. So I've been looking to find other people that are in the industry because I'm only 1 year. I'm an infant of my business. And what I really have is the passion for the food and for the customer experience. I was born in Albania, raised in Greece, so Europe focuses on the experience. Everywhere you go, restaurants, nightclubs, hotels, you have the top-notch hospitality. So when I came here, I didn't see that. And that was the gap that I'm like, that's what I'm gonna do. So how do you grow from 1 to 100, 200, or all the success that you had, and keeping the same passion?
By the way, I was just in Albania last week with Eddie Rama in Tehran. My wife's Albanian, so some great Albanian operators and entrepreneurs. You know, the question isn't necessarily how do you go from 1 to 100 and 200. I think the question is how do you build a sustainable multiple, a brand that you can get a multiple around. A lot of my friends who are in the lifestyle restaurant business, you know, they have a lot of restaurants. End of the day, they have to be able to sell it. There has to be a buyer, right? What we did in our restaurants, we took our restaurants, we tied them to a hotel management company, and we sold them for a 32 times multiple. We dragged that revenue up. So to you, I would say, right now it's about building one location, one brand, and focus on that and be able to expand it. Not to do 10 different ideas, but really focus on one, find the KPIs, the profitability, all the things that go from one, and then start building a team that you can start expanding it, whether it's regionally, and it'll get there. Success will find you once you get the right, you know, the right model and the right formula. Because it's probably the most difficult business today more than ever, you know, because of labor laws, because of, I mean, all the KPIs are very difficult to execute. So it's getting that right idea and success will come. But, you know, do it in a manner knowing 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, who's going to buy this thing? And that to me is as important as the time and energy you're going to spend over the next 10 or 15 years being as successful as you want to be.
Were you thinking about that when you first started SBE? By the way, SBE tells people what it stands for. I didn't even know I'm your buddy, and I didn't know it stands for.
It's just my nickname, Sammy Boy, and then entertainment. And
So, but when you first were creating that, were you already thinking that far? Or when did you start thinking 5, 10 years in the future who might be the right purchaser partners?
The idea is when we built all these restaurants and bars in LA, the idea was building them and then end up putting them in the SLS hotels.
Okay.
And which is what we ended up doing. I mean, we had 41 hotels by 2019 around the world. We had another 55 signed that were opening. And we had within those 200 bars and restaurants, of which 90% of them were part of management, or management fees that we were getting. And then as you know, we built the same amount of residential towers. So we built 41 branded residential towers of SLS branded hotels or Mondrian or Delano. And we sold about $4 billion of branded residential, which meant we got a fee for it. But like when you go to Ritz-Carlton, or Four Seasons, we were by far the largest in lifestyle. They're the only ones really in lifestyle that's scaled that business. But to answer your question, that was, I don't know if it was the idea when I started, but the idea of building these brands and injecting them into our hotels was definitely part of the original idea.
And when you sold the business, you kept the brands. How important was that?
Well, I think the F&B brands are the juice, because to me, why we still have, almost 40 restaurants around the world, and it keeps you relevant. It keeps the conversation going as far as your connectivity. And I think that to me is, no matter what business now that we have a couple of very interesting businesses that we've been doing for the last 4 or 5 years, is it really gives you the ability of creating content. Because in our world, original content and executing that is the most important part of real estate, all the way down to, pretty much anything in the hospitality side.
What differentiates you?
Yeah.
One more question from the audience. Yes. Yes.
Sam, thank you for being here. My name is Sam as well, Sam Mustafa. Very similar background. I went to Charleston Hospitality Group, and he's saying focus on one brand. A little bit too late for me. I have 7 brands right now, trying to scale and trying to figure out basically how to make a difference. Do I go backward and try to consolidate? Do I sell some of the brands to kind of be able to scale? I do have a management hospitality, but it seemed like it's a lot harder now to try to...
What's your most successful brand?
Toast all day.
So 3 meal, all day breakfast.
It's actually just 1 meal. It used to be 3 meals. Since COVID happened, we decided to do a 7 to 3 model, and actually it was more profitable.
So I'm sure you know about First Watch, right? First Watch is a...
Oh yeah, I study them every day.
Yeah, so to me, you think about it as what brand can you expand, right? Can you license? Can you get into food service? Can you bring it to hotels? Because ultimately, that gives you very fast scale because other people are investing in your brand to put into their locations. The breakfast piece, First Watch, is a company that went, before it was just IHOP and Denny's. This company came named First Watch, who basically said, we're gonna take it up a notch. We're gonna make it cool. We're gonna go after all the suburbs, and we're gonna go a place you can have breakfast, a full service concept, but you can have the champagne, you can have brunch, and we're only gonna operate from 7 to 3.
Correct.
7 days a week. No second shift.
No.
And they're doing about 3 million, on that shift, 3 million a year and about 500,000 of EBITDA.
Wow.
And the company went public. I know the CEO very well. And the company went public, I think it's worth $1.5 billion now.
Right.
Oh my God.
And they're opening 400 locations a year. So to me, that's a great vertical to be in right now because very few people can do that.
Actually, I beat them at their game. My EBITDA 34%. So I was able to master it just in one location. Then I start duplicating. So I have now 6 corporate stores, 7 under construction. But I felt like I was operating out of a very small town. The more exposure I got, the more I taxed. So in my mind, it's like, okay, I need to, build something outside the state. And it seemed like
this is in South Carolina?
Charleston. Yes. So you start from LA. It's a big city. I guess a lot more. People don't really care about who's doing what. There's a lot of money there. In a small town mentality, it's.
I wouldn't say that.
Depends on who you talk to.
Yeah.
The targets become bigger fast.
Right.
Listen, it seems like you have an amazing brand already.
Thank you.
And it seems like your KPIs are there. You're expanding it. So I think you've answered your question. The question is, how can you get it now into the visibility of some of the big operators that can license your brands and manage it, and more importantly, the hotel companies who need exactly that. I mean, we can talk offline. I tell you at this point, go get an advisor, meaning a banker, right? Have them put into kind of put your business and your pipeline into some sort of business plan, and then see if you can go out there and raise some good minority capital that can either be strategic or a really good way of which you can leverage your business value. Because that business, the way you've described it, is worth a lot of money.
Thank you. I started franchising last year. We went through the FDD and trying to scale. Did you franchise? I wasn't really sure.
We have now in our premium fast food business, we do franchise. Yeah.
Okay.
You have a model. You've talked about access to currency or access to capital.
Yeah.
We've had this team has had Howard Marks out to speak. During 2008, he was investing $400 million a week in the stock market when everybody was freaking. He's made so much money on distressed debt. Yeah. I'm just curious. I asked him at one time with the group here. I said, "You deal with so many companies that go under and make all this money in distressed debt. What's the number one reason they go under?" He said, "Undercapitalization. They don't capitalize long enough. Besides, at the right price point."
Exactly.
Tell me what you mean by that model for you, because it sounds like it would relate to him as well.
No, but as I was saying earlier, getting a good idea and getting to the ultimate altitude, you're going to go through turbulence, right? Whether it's a recession, whether it's high interest rates, whatever it is. One bad location taking 90% of your energy as far as growth. So having capital that can withstand that is important, right? But more importantly, having capital that can allow you to take advantage and build your team, build your development team. Make sure you don't make any mistakes. That are, things that, there's always curveballs. Make sure you have the bandwidth to have a couple curveballs come, because in the restaurant business, curveballs will come. And it could be mealing out, the stuff that's not fun, the technical stuff. So I think access to capital and having a strategic partner, not just a capital partner, can take your business and hopefully be as big as First Watch, if not bigger.
Thank you. It will be bigger.
I know, I have no doubt.
Give it up for him. One of the things, before we talk about C3, one more, to be able to scale and to have that many employees in a business that requires, all businesses require, but really requires giving people a great experience. What's the secret? Is it the right hiring, right people in the right seats? Is it finding the right manager leaders? You had how many employees at your peak before you sold?
11,000.
11,000.
In 9 countries. Yeah.
In 9 countries. So tell us a little bit how you manage that at the level of quality you're able to do. Because one thing you remember, everyone, a low-level customer, you can give them on a dollar's worth of spending, you can give them, 50 cents worth of value, they're okay. A high-end customer, you give them $1 worth of value for $1, they're going to be pissed off. they want $3, they want $5 to the value. So you have a customer that requires a whole different level of focus and attention. So how do you get employees to be unified and create a culture where you can sustain that?
I mean, you just said it right there. If you have a culture that people want to come work for, and that takes a lot of time. That takes, in many cases, years of dedication, because, word of mouth is the most powerful way in which amazing people come work for you. Yeah. Like, I want to go work for that company. They're doing something cool. They're taking care of their employees. They're making their employees be part of the story. I always say, when you come work with us, I want your fingerprints on all of our, on our brand. And like when you start at 26, it's a lot different. You can only attract, your track record is, a couple months, but I think ultimately, because we started doing dynamic things, we were able to go into a market and say, SBE is coming here. And we were blessed that people were tracking us in our business and say, I want to go work with that company. Even if it's for a year or 2 years to get exposure into what they're doing and then make it, we have so many of my former people that are entrepreneurs now. I'm so proud of them. So the best validation for me is so many of my former team members are now CEOs of companies, running big hotel chains, running big restaurant companies, which are stories we celebrate in our organization. But listen, when you've made every mistake there is to make, like me, you can look with a very unique perspective. But I think ultimately, to your question, is you're going to hire people. Hopefully 6 out of 10 of them are going to be good, right? It's just rule of math, rule of thumb in this particular space. But if you can build upon, and the 4 people that aren't good, if you can understand they're not good, have a very clean and respectful break, and then now you hire another 10 and another 10. The foundation of what you've built through time should have a very strong foundation. And if you can't hire from within, and if you can't grow from within, that tells the story of your culture the best. And that's where I got into trouble a couple times. I did expand from within, and those people weren't ready for the next chapter. But loyalty was there. And I told them I'm going to do it. I did. And so even in those stories, there's some really good learnings as well. So it is 100% about, I think, building an organization like you have built for the last 40 years, that you have to work, you have to be at that particular organization. You have to be there, especially if you're somebody young or if you're somebody who really wants to come monetize the amazing skill sets they've built around that industry.
And when you get those 6 out of 10, which is often a high number for a lot of people, but if the people are coming to you because you built the brand, that's more likely. Those other 4, how important, so everybody hears it, how important is to be able to make that transition and get them out soon? I mean,
I think doing that as fast as possible, and having your HR teams, having your leadership, you have to be able to make that switch fast, or else they become toxic, right? They become toxic to a culture, and they become toxic to the energy and momentum of a company. But you have to do it respectfully. You have to give them a chance. It depends which role they're in. If they're just not coming to work, that's easy. If they're trying but don't have the skill sets they represented, that's a little more difficult and challenging. If they're just good people and you like being around them, but they're just not executing their customer satisfaction. So having KPIs and having it as measured as possible, and having communications, because good people want to make an impact. I always say, if we were talking in front of a new hotel we're opening, I say, from the dishwasher to me, we have one thing in common: time. That's our denominator. Doesn't make a difference who you are. You don't want to come to work and waste your time. I don't want to come to work and waste our time. Let's make sure that this is an environment that we're respecting the one thing we all have in common, which is time away from our family, from our kids, from philanthropy, whatever else we want to do. Let's make this the most impactful time. Some people get it, some people want to get it, and they can't, and some people just can't. So turning that fast is very important.
Because it can destroy your brand. In fact, there's a study done by Stanford. Most of you know the Stanford study I told you about that was done on depression. They did one starting this last December. It's the largest behavioral study they've ever done, 750 people. And what they wanted to study was the impact of our work on people's level of engagement, because engagement in a company is directly related to EBITDA. The highest engagement in companies, Salesforce, Apple, people of that nature, at least prior to COVID, have them absolutely direct relationship to EBITDA or profitability. And so what's interesting, in 3 years of shutdowns, the people that are engaged, the number dropped the most in history in 3 years. Being shut down, people's peace. And there's 3 groups. There's engaged, there is disengaged, and disengaged or not engaged is that group of people that you heard people talk about quiet quitting, where they're just doing the minimum to get by. And then there's actively disengaged. They're actually in your business, but they're pissed. And they get pissed at you because they're pissed at their own life, or maybe you did something, I don't know. But the bottom line is they're trying to harm your company and they're still in you. The biggest jump was drop from engagement to massive increase in disengagement.
Yeah.
So it took, the biggest drop in history took 3 years, and in 5 days of the 750 people, we're at the 6-month mark. They normally measure people a month or a 3-month study. They're gonna do a year-long study. But we increased their engagement by more than 100% across the board, and it's grown every month since they went to the event. We've never talked to them again. So the tools you've learned here, you want to take home and make sure you create that kind of engagement. Engagement's everything. Let's talk about C3. This is very exciting. You saw an opportunity before COVID. Let's talk a little about it. It's the fastest growing global tech platform in the world. Tell us what C3, how it came about, and what's the intention, what's the vision?
I kind of, in 2018, 2019, was being curious, and I saw brands like Shake Shack and Chipotle and Sweet Green and all these great premium product. We call it premium QSR, quick service restaurant, fast casual type category in food. We were dealing only full service. And we had a brand that we had for many years called Umami Burger, which is a very famous umami burger brand. And we were deciding whether to sell it or not. Anyway, fast forward, what we saw was there wasn't one company that had a collection of 20, 30 unique brands that were chef-inspired, entrepreneur-inspired, celebrity-inspired, creator, YouTuber-inspired, that fit the full category of what we thought was the next change and revolution in food, which was a premium product. And the consumers were changing, the operators were changing, everybody was really changing to a much better product. So we decided to create this company in 2018, 2019 that was going to focus on all the relationships that we had built in the full service and then now doing it in a fast food portfolio. And that was kind of the first idea. And then COVID happened. So we were kind of at the right point. I sold the hotel company before COVID, and we had a food tech company right before COVID too. So it kind of, it exploded in a good way, because then everybody needed our brands to be able to license them and deliver them during COVID, which was very interesting, because consumer behavior was really what I was focused on, and scale. I said, you know what, if Shake Shack today is worth $3 billion, right? And Danny Meyer, who's the founder of that company, was a legend. His restaurant business in New York is not worth $3 billion, right?
Yeah. He's talked to our group.
So when you think about getting a good idea and get it to scale fast, but with right branding and right focus, that was the real idea. But what we ended up figuring out during COVID is that we could then, through these brands, license them to airlines, license them to food service companies, license them to everybody who needs new bespoke product, but then we could license them to restaurant chains like TGI Fridays, IHOP, Denny's, Quiznos, and let them, through our brands, reinvent themselves to their core customer, not just for delivery, but helping them reshape their menus globally and giving them an instant amount of credibility where they can change their EBITDA multiple and also their franchisees multiple. And that's where the thing kind of really has taken off, in the sense of being able to sit with companies and through our brands be able to have them reposition themselves in a global community.
It's that, the ability to take on brands. So now you're not getting fast food, you're getting the most exquisite branded chef in the world, but it's being delivered to you. Now you built your own system for delivery as well, right?
Yeah. So we have our own marketplace, we have our own tech marketplace. So the idea was, how do I deal with a chain that has 1,000 stores? How can I license them something that they can make another $1 million a year in revenue by licensing my brand and not spend any money in the kitchen? More importantly, not spend any money on their tech.
Yes.
Their point of sale systems and things like that, and make it almost a no-brainer and help them really look at the future. Because, casual dining is a tough category, right? We're talking millions and millions of, casual dining chains that are just, we call them, you don't want to be the next Blockbuster. You don't want to be the next Kodak.
Yeah.
Right? You have to embrace the digital transformation of your customer, and your customer doesn't necessarily want to come in the store. And if they do, they want something healthy, chef-inspired, unique. You can't culturally do that because your organization may be a little not as innovative as you hope, we can be that solution. And the business model, which is I've shared with you, is super exciting because we can, if Burger King does $1.2 million a year in revenue, an average Burger King in the US, Burger King is a brand which doesn't own any restaurants, they just own their brand. They take about 4%. So you can do the math, it's roughly about $40,000 or $50,000 in licensing fees. Each Burger King pays back to RBI, which is a $42 billion public company here in Miami. We are now generating $500,000 for, let's say, TGIF Fridays. We take 6%, right? So for us, we're basically almost reinventing the Burger King model, and we're at 850 locations with that particular partner, and no investment needed.
Wow.
And to us, that's the digital revolution of food. And I think one of the things you guys had earlier today is that Abraham Lincoln, the future is what you make of it, right? And I actually sent that to my branding team. It said, if you want to be the future, you have to create. In this particular case, you see a white space. You know that they need a digital disruption. They don't know how. People can't really figure out how to make money on going on DoorDash or Uber Eats because they got to pay a commission, and they're not really doing anything other than putting their menu up on a big marketing platform. Can you help them redefine themselves? And that's what C3 is at its core. There's a lot of other stuff we do, but that's really the core. And when you get to 20, 30,000 locations cooking your food, your brands, it becomes a very valuable business.
Think about what we talked about on day one. What is it all about? Identifying the pattern, seeing the pattern, then being smart enough to use it, and then find a way to create something that fulfills it at a higher level. And think of the difference. He's getting 50% more than Burger King and didn't have to build the chain. He's going to all these chains that took forever to build and saying, oh, add $1 million to TGIF to every one of your restaurants here. And he's taking the downtime, right? Because these are what they call ghost kitchens, the prep kitchens, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you can explain that to people because I don't know if people understand.
Yeah, well, what we first said is, okay, kitchens in general, and a lot of our restaurants, they have underutilized capacity, right? If you're, let's say, a steak concept, you're generally 90% of your revenue is dinner. Right? You may have a lunch business, breakfast, you're closed. But the infrastructure's there. Your kitchens are there, your team is there, your general manager, you're paying rent. So the first idea was, how can we look at existing infrastructure and unlock the value of that real estate by giving you tools that then you can be able to monetize by using that through your supply chain, your vendors. So that was interesting. That was the first learning. The second one was, what if we licensed you brands, then you could start putting on your menus for customers to come back. Yes. In-store sales, bring in your customer, which means no delivery fee, no packaging, and I can bring a millennial customer now back into a chain that had probably never been. We have one of our big partners is IHOP. It's 1,600 locations, and 90% of their revenue is breakfast, and it's really over 3 days: Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And now IHOP 30, 20, 15 years ago was a disruptor. I mean, IHOP was the breakfast concept of the future. And they're a great company, owned by Dine Brands, again, another public company. So, we acquired a company who was in 1,100 of their locations.
Wow.
And they were generating, using the same menus, creating a Mexican brand for dinner. Because most of the IHOPs are open 24 hours.
Wow.
So it's not as sexy as, doing an SLS in Dubai, but the impact, because you're really saving the casual dining industry.
Yes.
You're saving it because end of the day, these big 5,000 square foot locations around the country and around the world were built by entrepreneurs that were franchising this brand. If we don't give them the solution how to make more money and bring new customers and be relevant, all the things that are part of business mastery at all levels, and even AI and all these other things that you guys are at the cutting edge of, is at its core, how do you bring people back out and into the restaurants? And how do you give them tools? It's like when Target 20 years ago did a partnership with a cool designer, and everyone was like, why the hell is Target doing a deal with this crazy designer, Isaac Mizrahi or Lenny Kravitz? And the designer realized, I may have to justify a little bit of brand equity by going to the masses. Target realized, I need to continue my relevancy, right?
Yes.
So it's kind of the same model from that perspective.
They became the notch up above Walmart by doing that.
Exactly. And now Walmart does it, and who's another big.
Yes.
So we have a partnership with Sofia Vergara, who's a great friend, and we're really going after non-Mexican Latin food. It's called Toma, and Sofia's a 50-50 partner with us. And we're going after the fastest growing demographic in the US, which is non-Mexican Latinos.
Yes.
They don't have croquetas, they don't have empanadas. I mean, Miami, you got it. LA, you got it.
Yes.
But around the world, and Walmart is a big partner of hers, so we've created a huge, relationship through her with Walmart, and
Wow.
that's how we can disrupt that. So there's CPG, it's if you like branding and marketing, it's an endless business to be in because you can really make an impact in many different ways.
How many of you feel how this man thinks, the differentiation thinks? It's amazing. Sam, you talked about in the beginning, you created what you wanted, right? So you wanted nightclubs and nightlife and then lifestyle. Then you got older and it's like, didn't appeal to you at the same level. You and I met because of your concept of the estate and what you need and want for yourself today. People like you and I both want for ourselves, our lives, our families. Tell people about what you're creating with the estate.
Sure. So in 2018, 2019, I got, as I told you, and I think we shared with you guys, I wasn't as excited about that category. I wasn't the customer. The customer I was really now looking for a more unique product, like a luxury hotel brand, a place I can take my family, my kids, a little better service, better, and brands like Four Seasons and One and Only and Rosewood and some of these brands that you guys I'm sure are familiar with. So selling that business, I knew that I wanted to go this way. I wanted to go feed the masses and democratize food and bring the best chefs to people. At the same time, I wanted to kind of really leave my legacy for the next 20 or 30 years, which is around luxury, but it was also the one thing that somebody like me needed. I needed access to longevity. I needed access to technology. I needed a place that I could go and reset at the highest level. I needed a place that I know that I would be exposed to technology that I knew was there and I'd hear from other people, but not a place, I needed a place that I could go that I could trust and say, you know what, this has been validated by the best people out there in the hormone therapy, really the first inning of this evolution. And it kind of hit me in 2018, 2019, that is going to be the core differentiation of this luxury platform. And it wasn't long after I read in one night, binge read Life Force by Tony Robbins.
You read that in one night?
I listened to it. I listened to it. I listened to it. I listened to it like 5, 6
You
weeks.
didn't sleep for 20 hours, I get it.
No, but it was one of those, you guys know, like when you binge watch Netflix, when I hear a great book,
yes.
In this case that resonated as a friend, and also somebody was just like, so as you know, we called your team and then you and I spoke and said, you just built the most amazing playbook of what we're trying to do in the world of luxury. And so it accomplishes all of our missions, helping people, more importantly, helping them in the sense of teaching them something that they didn't even know existed, right? It's one thing to say, okay, you gotta lose weight, you gotta do this, you gotta do that. But now the world is evolving so fast. I'm not gonna take the thunder of you being the leader in sharing this. If you can bring the most influential people around the world who stay at certain types of hotels, get them to be adopters in this format, then they can disseminate and make that mission and impact to help people on all levels. And that's kind of what the vision of the estate is. There's residential. We have now about 11 locations around the world being built. And the team constantly gets stronger. And it's just amazing having these discussions with people about helping them, giving them access, giving them credibility, and having a brand that undeniably people know they can trust, and it's all about innovation of longevity and prevention and getting people healthy before they need to go.
If you really want to go get yourself healthy, and most people will go to some place in Switzerland or Europe, there's a variety of places you can go, but the actual amount of health support you get in that environment is like a spa. It really isn't anything dramatic. And the technology, as most of you know, has changed so radically and so quickly. So imagine a place that has this man's taste-making that is the greatest quality you can imagine, the greatest food you can imagine, the greatest environment you imagine, that you can own a home or you go there to stay at the hotel. But this is a place that you go once a year, or you go a couple times a year, or you send your employees to. And if you saw it, when Sam came in and showed me his vision of this, because he knows every data point you can imagine, so I was blown away by the detail, but also just the pure beauty. When you're at the stage of life, when you have money, the next thing you want is quality of life, which is length of life, duration, energy, vitality, strength. You want to be proud of your body. But where do you go? And most of it is so outdated. So I'm super excited and so grateful to partner with you on this, because we're going to really revolutionize this for people. You are by yourself. I'm just bringing the right people to you, but you've got all the right people and all the employees. Plus, you have all these employees from all that you've done in the past that you've reactivated, haven't you?
The one thing you guys will appreciate, and I'm sure, is when this gentleman who sees, I don't know how many deals a day, a week, a month, a year, and his team, more importantly, that are under him, who are seeing 5x that. But I remember the first time you and I spoke about this, and it was the fact that not only you got it, which was obviously your vision of wellness and taking care of people, but then you decided to work with me. It was really, there's a couple moments in my life that were transformative, but the day he said, "Hey Sam, I think we should do this together," that was one day that I get goosebumps when I still think about it. But to do that, you have to be prepared.
That's my privilege. Are you kidding me? It's my privilege.
It really needs humility and vision, and his dedication to investing in people and technologies, and just having all these amazing people come around him and feel his energy when he doesn't need, him and his lovely wife who are committed to making people feel better and making people have an optimistic. And I think we're all disciples of you, Tony. And it's an obligation that we need to do it in our communities and lives.
Yes.
You have taught us, and now it's our obligation now to disseminate that globally. And that's what the estate is, really. It's taking your vision and taking it through a very unique platform around the world.
Well, I think, right now, some of you know about Fountain Life, where people will go, but they don't get to stay. They have to leave their home, be there. And what's invaluable is we find about 14% of the people have a life-threatening situation they don't know about. I have a gentleman just sent me a video the other day that I knew his wife. I didn't know him personally, and she dragged him down there, and he didn't want to go. And he said, "Oh, I've already had my blood test and everything else." And I found he had kidney cancer. But you catch it at stage 1 or 2, it's very different than stage 3 or 4. Stage 3 or 4, they talk about 80% of the people die. I prefer 20% live, but that's how they talk about it. But it's 98 to 99.9% if you catch it at stage 1 or 2. It was an outpatient process for him. It lasted 45 minutes and he's totally well. But the doctor showed him that he was probably 2 to 4 weeks away before it got into his lymph system, and then he would have died. Yeah. And you see this over and over again. Then there's another 55, 60% of the people, guys like us, that push themselves like crazy, that need to rejuvenate, and they've got something that could explode or transform their energy or their health or got them to lose weight. And the people just don't know about it. So the idea that I don't have to go away, that this becomes my home, my place that my employees go, my family can go, and have your level of quality, your level of vision, it's really, really exciting. Really exciting.
So those are the two things that we're spending most of our time on: feeding the masses with quality, and then obviously, building a platform that we think is a multi-generational business with so many different verticals of just making people feel better.
Yeah. Sam, you're incredible. Thank you.
Thank you so
very much. Sam Nazarian, stay up here if you don't mind.